Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Creative Insider, a podcast that will help you succeed in every creative field. Today, it's the 7th episode, the magic number. We had to have some technical issues in the beginning of the week, but finally the episode is out. The topic of the today episode is what are the opportunities and challenges while moving abroad for following your dreams? And we will be discussing that with Désirée Bambynek. Enjoy this episode.
Stops just like that.
Hello everybody, so we're finally recording the 7th episode after a few technical problems on the weekend. And today we have first guest, which is Désirée Bambynek, which happens to be my girlfriend, but it's not the reason why she's on the podcast. So Désirée, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be part of the process.
So the topic of the today episode will be how to move abroad. So when I came up with the idea about making the episode about this topic, I shared with you, and then I realized you are also very experienced in the field of moving around. Yes. So you can tell us a little bit more about where have you lived so far and what is your international experience?
Yeah, well, I'm a metropolitan hopper, you could call it that. I grew up in the States and in France. I was born in America with German parents, so I grew up in two cultures there already and went to up to 5th grade in France, and we ended up moving every 2 to 3 years. And I kind of continued that whole process up through my career. Then going to Germany, from Germany to the States again, coming back to Germany, moving around a lot within the country, and yeah, so it's been quite an international journey, actually.
So when was the last time you switched countries?
That was in 2015. I was in Seattle for 1 year, and then I came back to Germany and to Düsseldorf.
Sounds very interesting. And for the people who are listening, I don't know the story about the moving around in detail, so I'm gonna learn something new today too. So the idea is that we try to explain to the people what are like the difficulties, what are the challenges you have when you're moving in different countries. So I guess when you were a kid, your parents were taking care of the annoying part of the moving around, setting up new flat documents and stuff like this. But how did you decide to move? So you moved from Germany to Seattle?
Yeah.
And how did you decide to move exactly to Seattle?
Well, to explain that, I first have to say that I'm a risk taker. That's important to know. And I like doing new stuff and experiencing new cultures and new places. So how I decided was that basically I thought, well, I want to go back home, which is the States for me. And I didn't want to go to one of the places I had already been or grown up in. And I'd always wanted to go to Seattle. So that's basically how I picked Seattle.
And how did you, because for example, I moved to Germany as a student, as you know, and for me it was easier because when you're taking part in a program like the Erasmus program, you are supported a lot from the organization of the program and from the university. So for example, they take care of finding for you a place to go, like a room. They give you a buddy. Like a buddy means there are local students that join the program just to have some credits at the university for their studies. and they help you with managing, doing the paperwork when you arrive in the country, and they show you around where you can buy things. They show you around basically everything you need to survive. And how was the process when you were going to Seattle? So like you say, you pick on the map Seattle, and how did you start? How did you go there?
Well, I originally went on a first vacation in September to check out the place. I was there for 2 weeks, I think, and I went with a friend, and we lived with friends. So we had one couple that we knew, and that's where I fell in love with Seattle. When I went there, I was in the middle of my career, so I had already worked a few years, so I wasn't able to profit from having, a safety net like the university can give you, which is a really great opportunity for young professionals or for students to really, have that, sort of like safety cocoon around you. I didn't have that. I only had my friends and the knowledge that I had from being an American and always having one foot in the States, from the news and the community that is the expat community internationally. And so after my vacation, I came back to Germany, and I was like, well, it's time to just go there. You're just going to do it. And basically I decided within 4 months to move there. And I stayed with my friends at the beginning. They were awesome enough to, the good old American home is always is always open to people. So I stayed there for 4 weeks before finding a place. But I basically had to find my way through everything on my own. I had never worked in the States before, so that was the first challenge. I knew the culture, but I had never really worked there. I was never employed there. So first thing was how was I going to earn money? Then the second thing was Americans are very open, but if you want to do business with them, it's sort of like, well, you come from Europe.
So
that's far away.
but before going, did you have in your head like some sort of a deadline to you to settle down, like maybe a budget for 5 months, 6 months, or?
Yeah, I had a budget for a year. So theoretically, I could have done a year sabbatical and not worked at all, but I didn't plan on doing that. But I had a budget for a year, and I think that's very important if you do move abroad, even if you have the support from university or family somewhere else, that you have enough budget to sustain yourself.
And you said you know the American culture, but you wanted to do business with the people. So what was your plan? What did you start doing in the US? Did you have your own business? Do you wanted to start up there, or?
I'd always thought about going solo. So I actually started my first business in the States. So I didn't even start it on turf that I knew, which was German business culture. But I started it on turf I didn't know, which was American business culture. And I knew that when I'd go over there, I didn't want to be employed, even though that wouldn't have been a problem because I'm a native citizen. But I wanted to build my own business, and I wanted to actually do it within the first 3 years.
So, but the podcast is called Creative Insider. So you are a very particular kind of creative. So you can tell the listeners what is your field of work?
I'm what you call a creative brand strategist. So I do brand strategy with, and I connected with business strategy, and that is also a very creative field because you have to understand what makes brands unique and how to make them shine.
So now to connect the topic of business and the topic of moving abroad, because the intention is to help creatives to understand better what are the opportunities in the creative field. So, for example, when I moved here, there is in the architectural field there is a certain difference in the approach of architecture. For example, between Italy and between Germany. So, for example, in Italy, of course, it's more important the design part. So we say, okay, we need a cool building. and we need it to be attractive, and we need to invest a lot in a concept, in a design that's fascinating. And in Germany, it's always, you could do a cool design, but it's very important that you build it in a good way. So when you moved from Germany to the US, did you see any difference in your field that you needed to adapt to?
Yes, Americans. So the field in general is anything that has to do with brand and business development. So marketing, communications, business strategy, and business development in general. And the main differences was the way that business was done. And in two fields especially. The first field, how do I get clients? So the whole new business process about winning clients, the whole sales process is completely different in the States than in Germany. But also in the term of what kind of client relationship your clients have with you, what kind of documents do they expect, what kind of frequency of calling and talking to them do they expect? Let me give one brief example. In Germany, it's very much a business culture about you really need to give me a very concrete added value that I can use immediately for a meeting to be worth it. In America, it's more like, let's go have a coffee, let's brainstorm a few things, let's pick each other's minds, let's really create a sort of deeper business relationship. And then our work relationship will become more profitable for both sides. So it's a different approach. You have to invest more time in the relationship building from a one-on-one perspective in America, and in Germany it's more from a what are you going to give me perspective. So it's a different approach.
And did you need to adapt a lot to this? Did you need to change your approach to hooking clients? So you basically needed to be a little different, right?
Well, I've always been an American at heart in the way I do business, and I realized while I was in the States that what made me different in Germany was that American side of me. So I didn't have to adapt that much because I'm very much of a people person anyway, and about connecting on that kind of level. I did have to drink a lot more coffee. And eat a lot more muffins on those new business meetings.
Well, by knowing you, I know that coffee wasn't a problem for you. You can drink quite a lot of coffee, and me too. So that's good. That's really cool. But how is also, because moving, like, people are very, very excited to move to another country. Most of the times, because I think creatives especially are adventurous. They like to discover, to be creative, to experience new things, and but nobody thinks about another side effect. For example, you when you move to another country, of course you have this all new set of opportunities, but you're leaving behind people that you already are friends with, that you are family with. So how was it? Do you have a different approach when you move to a country and you know that you don't know how long you're gonna stay there, or how do you deal with this? Because I'm sometimes also homesick, and even though we have flights, not now. You can go home, and when you're in another continent, it's a little different. So what can you say about this?
Well, I think you're right. There's an emotional aspect to it, and then there's an organizational aspect to it. And the emotional aspect is you are leaving your home turf. You are leaving your safety zone. You're leaving your comfort zone. You're leaving your loved ones, your friends, basically everything that sustains you, because creatives need a certain adventure aspect, I think, to get awesome ideas, no matter if it's a building or if it's a banner in brand design. But I think also that the safety aspect is very important too. And that emotional thing, that's actually one of the reasons why I came back earlier. I was actually planning on staying 5 years. And my grandmother lives in Erlangen, in Bavaria, in Germany, and she missed me a lot. And she was at an age where she didn't understand the time zone difference anymore, and she couldn't. America was like Mars for her, so it was too far away. And that's actually why I came back after a year, because it was too difficult for her to phone, even though I wrote letters and sent pictures and everything and called her once a week via Skype for phone. But it was just too difficult for her to have one of the family members so far away, so late in her life. And in the end, I'm glad I came back, because she actually passed 1 or 2 years ago. So,
I know that story. I'm sorry. But this is something that people need to know, that they for example, I had my granddad passing away while it was in Italy, and he was in Bulgaria, and accidentally it happened that that was the dad of my dad. So my dad was that weekend in Bulgaria, and I remember a Monday he called me and he said, well, I'm not coming back because I need to stay longer. So these are also things that you need to put in consideration when you're moving abroad. Like there is a lot of cool things that you're gonna experience. You're gonna have these awesome adventures, but there are also, you need to take in consideration that you're leaving those people, and your decision affects other people too, not only yourself.
Yeah, and I think before it happens, it all sounds so romantic and adventurous and awesome and, courageous. And after you've moved abroad, after a while, you also think back on it and say like, oh, that was such an awesome time. But a lot of people don't realize that it's tough. I mean, you're not only not with your friends, but you're in a completely different culture. And I don't mean Europe versus China, for example. Even Italian culture and German culture, they're almost neighbors. That culture is completely different. So you have to really have the nerves, the patience with yourself as well, and the patience with the new people around you, of course, too, to go through those tough times. Then it's tough from an organizational aspect too. You have completely new laws. I mean, we're talking about working abroad. There are different employment laws. There are different employment possibilities. It's what a lot of podcasts and YouTube videos and sort of like books forget to mention. Okay, have you done your research? What can you earn? What are the taxes like? What is employment security like? What is the healthcare system like? All these aspects makes it very intense as well, because like I said, you're not in your comfort bubble anymore, and it takes a while for that comfort bubble for you to establish that in a new country.
Yeah, so you touched some topics that I also experienced myself. Regarding the laws, I guess for you was a little easier at least to understand what are the laws, because you knew English, you're a native.
It's even harder if you're not fluent in the language.
So
you have to consider that too.
For example, when I came here, I didn't know to repeat where my address was, because it was these German long names. And for example, I can tell also another story, because for the people who are thinking about moving abroad, may be very important, because when you're a young person that has no experience in the working industry or with work in general, and you haven't taken care of any taxes so far, or tax returns. For example, I had a really tricky situation, because I was a student, so I was still resident in Italy, but I was working in Germany. So I got in this very tricky double taxation situation, which was just because I couldn't find the right experts in the field to help me. And after a long battle, I figured out not to pay a bunch of money back in Italy. So for the people who are moving around, I would suggest to, when you leave a country, be sure that you're leaving the country on the tax return side too. So you need to declare that you're leaving the country.
Yeah, and keep all documentation. Very important too.
And you said the culture impact. I mean, in Europe, probably we have the more variation of cultures in such a small distance. Like, for example, when I came to Germany, again, I was lucky because I was taken care from the local university. You have this all infrastructure that kind of helps you. So I got, for example, a paper I will never forget with the German cultural highlights. So, for example, I don't know, difference was that in Germany you have the supermarkets that are not open on Sunday, which...
Oh yeah, that was the most difficult thing for me too.
So, for example...
frustrating.
For example, there was why you need to be on time, because you know me, I'm Italian, I'm always late. But in Germany, they explained to us that if you let somebody wait for you, you are very, very unpolite because you consider your time more important than the time of the other person. And that's why people here try to be so much on time, and they're pretty pissed off if you're not on time. And yeah, so you need to be very adaptable, I think. I hear constantly people which are living here and they repeat this sort of sentence, I don't know, yeah, German people, I like this and I like that. And like in a negative way, of course. And I don't understand that, because I think that when you move to a new country, you need to be open to receive something new from the country, understand the local culture, and then complaining about, I don't think even complaining, I just consider what is better for you. So I've never been to the US before. What were your, if like, because before you moved back to the US, you've been living for a few years in Germany, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you probably got used to the German culture.
To the Bavarians, which is also different culture than the German culture.
Okay, so what were some things that were surprising to you culturally when you moved back to the US, when you were like, oh, I didn't remember that?
Well, first of all, the States have always been sort of like my home. So for me, I'm an expat here at the moment, even though I also have the German citizenship and my parents are German. I'm very much an American in a lot of aspects. So moving back to the States was more like, oh my God, finally, like people like me, awesome. So it was more the first time I came to Germany that I had to adapt to Germans. Like one example is how people greet each other. I think that's different in every country.
I had a lot of problems with that. I have a lot of stories because I had to say hi to international people, and in Italy we kiss each other. Apparently in Denmark they don't even look at each other. So I kissed those people we kiss on the cheeks, and that was very embarrassing for them. But go ahead. What was the?
But that's one of the biggest culture things in business. Of course, you give the hand, but even in that sort of permeates into business. But in Germany, for example, or let me just put it a different way, I'm a huge hugger. I meet somebody and
perfect for Corona time.
Yeah, I'm very much restrained at the moment. It's very difficult. But in the States, you're more of a hugger. You have a little more. I don't want to say physical contact because it gives the wrong message. But here in Germany, you have a much greater distance. And so I felt more at ease in America that people were immediately on a very personal level with you. That's one of the things that I had to very much adapt when I was in Germany. I'm still a hugger, pre-corona, of course. I'm still a hugger, so I didn't change that completely. But that's just one example. It's like how do you greet people, or what kind of topics are taboo here in Germany? Different topics. For example, here in Germany, you don't talk about money.
And you don't know. I won't say what kind of jokes you don't do in Germany. You can imagine it's about a historical period of time. Yeah. I'm not saying names because a lot of platforms tend to, I don't know, classify your podcast as not a, I don't know, like there are some names you cannot nominate in the podcast. But yeah, I got some, for example, cursing in Germany is super bad. In Italy, we curse all the time and we don't consider it a big deal. And we have these politically incorrect jokes that most of the people, when I say them, they're like, oh, you didn't, they cringe a lot.
Yeah, and that's one of the aspects. When you were talking before about the cliches, I'd like to come back to that because for me, cliches, of course, have their truth somewhere, but I think it's very difficult. And when you move to a different country, if it's for work or for pleasure or whatever, even if it's on a holiday, you have to be aware that it's a cliche probably that you know. And that is not every single German isn't going to be like that, or every single Italian, or every single Swede, or whoever. So you have to really differentiate to say, okay, I know Germans are punctual. I'm going to, keep that in mind, but not let it sort of stop you or create a barriers. That's the wrong approach. You have to get to know people, and every person is different. So I think you have to remember that when you move somewhere. Don't have those cliches too much in the forefront of your mind.
Yeah, and in the end of the day, as you said, every person is different. For example, I have this mental set. I said before that I try to first understand the local culture before I reject it. And the first year I was used to live in a student dorm. So everything you needed to do in that student dorm regarding your room was connected with housekeepers. In German, they're called Hausmeister. So those are like guys which are in their 50s, 60s, and they're not very fluent in any other language than the local dialects.
That's a cliche too, right there. So
no, well, but that's a cliche, but it was what it was, and but I've noticed that those they seem to me very grumpy in the beginning. And I was like, well, the people are grumpy, but when I see grumpy people that I need to deal with them on a regular basis, I try to be still very friendly to them and try my best. And I've noticed that as soon as I started speak some German, because in the beginning I couldn't speak German, when they notice I'm learning and I'm improving and I'm trying to talk their language, they got much friendlier. They got much, because they feel more comfortable themselves because they can interact with me. So I think that sometimes people tend to be very judgeful on the first sight, but sometimes even the local people need time to get to know you, because you're also, as they are new for you, you are new for them.
Yeah, and I mean, it's in our biology and in our how our brain works that new things we're going to be careful at the moment. We're going to say, okay, is this a danger? Can I trust this person to not kill me or something? But it's really much in our how we are triggered in our brains that we have to have a careful approach. And in general, if people, I mean, that's a tip for anything. If people see that you are making an effort to try to learn the language or adapt to the culture or understand the culture, they will be more forgiving for little mistakes, like, for example, saying phrases wrong or not knowing which way is what. But you really have to show them that effort. I experience a lot of people, especially in global companies that I consult, experience a lot of people that come from abroad and don't make the effort to learn the language because they're sort of protected in their little company. They're protected in their expat community. And it really creates a barrier, and it ruins the international experience that you could have because you're keeping it small. And I think that's very important too. You have to get out of that bubble because that's why you moved abroad in the first place. And yeah, I think you have to remember that.
I think so too. And well, if we go back to the career aspect, when you came back to Germany, do you think that just from having an experience abroad, was that a plus point on your resume? If that you have been basically you have worked in your field in two different countries?
Definitely. You understand things better. I mean, I've always had, let's say, an international bonus because I grew up abroad and we moved every 2 or 3 years. So I speak different languages as well, like you do. So I've always had that bonus. But I did see that it not only makes you more interesting, but it also makes you more credible. And nowadays, no matter what field you work in, it is a field that's going to be globally connected in some way or other. Some more, others less so, other industries. But it's always going to be important. And if you took that step to really diversify your understanding of what the industry is in different countries and what the products are and how they're sold or how they're created, it really gives you a plus point. But you have to highlight that plus point. If you're talking about job negotiations or finding a new job and you've been abroad, you have to really tell them, oh, it's where I got this and this and I learned this and this. They're not going to read it through the lines. You actually have to tell them how that enriched your career.
I think, for example, my field of work and creativity is very, very technical. So in my case, it was very helpful being basically educated in these two very different philosophical schools, if you want to say it that way. So I have a good understanding of how to create a good concept, a good basic design of a building. And then I have this extremely focused, constructive thinking that came from the German culture. And then just from being in working next to people which are from so many different culture than yours. And then on top of this, when you go in an office in Germany for architecture, you have people from every possible nationality. So, for example, currently I'm working in a team with people that are from, each member of the team is from another country, and everybody have a different background. So you start, your horizons is much brighter. And of course, also you start learning, if you do something for a German client or for an Italian client or for another nationality client, then you will learn that you have to be more, you have to have always a different approach and be very open-minded. So I think a very positive aspect on that, it's actually this, that you see that the world, it's much more, there are so many variations. And I think that this is also positive on a social level, I think. Because what I've noticed by moving around, it was that people are slightly different they have sort of this shell that covers them, and they're different on the outside, but in the core, people are very, very similar. So we have our very similar core. And I think that just by simply moving around, that could be a very good it will be an improvement for your career, but I think that also on a social level, I think that the more people are exchanging cultures and opinions, the problems we're seeing currently, also with riots in the US, will be, which, for example, I don't care if you're black, yellow, red, or whatever skin color you have. I just don't. I'm in this generation. I think the millennials are the first generation which is transitioning towards being bilingual, being very multicultural.
Yeah, and being a global community. I mean, for us, it started with the social media phenomenon. As first the digital phenomenon, and then the social media phenomenon, going into real-time communications with each other on a global scale, and that really has impacted our generation. But the generation after us, they're not going to see any boundaries anymore. The only boundary they see is not, this is Italy, this is China. The boundaries that they see is, you have Weibo and we have WhatsApp. It's a platform boundary, and that's a completely different understanding of. And then we're going to be talking about platform cultures in the end, but that's a completely different topic. But what you said about the career, I want to circle back to that, because one of the things that you can highlight if you do work abroad, and with work abroad, I don't mean like 2 months or something. This is not an exchange, but actually deep dive into a different country and its culture, that you become a better team player because you understand what makes the cultures different, and you understand why for example, Eastern European, as one example, and maybe a Bulgarian teammate has a different view to work or to work ethic than maybe a Spanish teammate. So, and even bigger on an over European scale. So, and you're a better team player and also more adaptable. And that is definitely something that you can put on your resume and in soft skills.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that you need to, of course, leave behind your ego about your nationality when you join an international team. And as I said, try to understand the other culture. But I've talked to you in the last few weeks and even months. You are very, very passionate about talking about how the world it's gonna change through a pandemic. There are some also interesting issues on your social media platforms. And I was just thinking that we are making this episode to explain what are the options when you're moving abroad, and which is currently in this moment and time a very, very hard endeavor to accomplish, because there are still, the economy is in a very weird situation, and we have restrictions of traveling, or I mean, I don't know which countries, which kind of restrictions have, but for sure US, Europe, and we cannot move through continents currently, for sure. And I was thinking about this. Is it possible that maybe in the future, what do you think? Because you've talked also about platforms, because maybe we're suggesting people to move abroad. But another option I was just came up is that maybe people won't move anymore, but their jobs will move on a platform and they will join the job. For example, I was thinking we have all these video conference platforms, and do you think it's possible that companies are figuring out that we don't have to be physically present with each other, which on one side, of course, it's not cool because we're human, so we like to be together. But on the other side, companies will be like, okay, I had for now a pool of people which were in a range of, let's say, what is the range you can travel in a day? 50 kilometers. Like if you work in Frankfurt, you can be in a radius of 50 kilometers. But now with this situation, do you think that companies might get you on board and keep you in your home?
I think that's really looking into a magic 8-ball, to be honest. I think the issue of work from home under the tag of new work has been in discussion for quite some time in the industry. And I think it's going to be a mix of both, because we can do a lot digital. And the last few months have shown us that even people that are very, very careful on platforms and that don't really want to Skype or use Microsoft Teams or use a camera or do it from home or something, they got used to it because they had to, because that's the only way we could all do business together. But I think it's going to be really a mix of both, because one thing that digital channels are not good at the moment yet is the whole idea and concept of feeling like a team. And that's a very emotional aspect too. And Skyping 5 times a day or doing digital coffee breaks or something, it's not cutting it at the moment. I think maybe the platforms and the softwares have to evolve, but the whole thing of coming together as a collective to really, feel each other's energy and to say, oh, okay, you're in a good place right now because I feel you have a really, really good energy right now and you're intoxicating me and you're really pulling me and motivating me. That's very difficult on digital channels. And it's very difficult for people that are not very extroverted too. So I think it'll be a mix of both. But on the upside, if we are talking about working across borders, that is one thing you can do right now is to work more with teammates internationally if you already have those, to get on those projects because companies are really breaking down the borders between countries in their own organizations, and that's one very, very positive aspect.
Maybe, well, that's a good point about the whole connection. Because although I'm employed currently, I'm thinking about on the side from the different businesses, and I think that maybe you can create a sort of team building events which happens once in a while, and then everybody comes on board on that event.
I think offices are going to become very much communal spaces in the future, or that would be my vision for them, that they are really places where people come together and not just where 50 desks are next to each other.
Or another aspect of it is that now that there is this whole digitalization process in the different businesses, maybe businesses will be more open on actually having more video interviews. So maybe this will be the launchpad for a possible move abroad will be easier also by finding a job before you move. Like, because as you said, you moved first, and then when you were on place, you were starting thinking about how to set up your work.
Well, I had already decided how I'd set it up, but it's that's why I said I'm a risk taker. It's a very bold move. I wouldn't suggest it for everybody. So it's always easier, and it's just easier if you have a company that's already interested in you, or you work for an organization that's willing to transfer you abroad for a year. It just makes it a little more streamlined for you, and I think that's something to consider. It doesn't mean that you're a wimp or that you're not courageous enough, because you're still courageous. Anything that takes you out of your comfort zone takes courage. So but if your organization can help you, or if you have an interested party that's going to get you over to them, that's always a good situation to be in.
I think you're saying this part of, you're remembering this part of the story where you moved abroad without with this risk-taking factor, but as you know, and I don't know if the audience know that, but I'm the second generation of immigrant, let's call it this way. So you have heard some crazy stories of my family, how they moved abroad.
It's probably why we are tuned in so well.
Crazy. Basically, my dad was moved abroad. So as I said, I'm from Bulgaria. So there was 30 years ago, there was another shake in the world, not on the health, not on a health level, but on a political level. So my dad left with just with a few bucks in the pocket and basically a small luggage, and then my mom followed him by running away from home without the communications we have today. So so you have this possibility to move abroad, going very crazy and take the first train or plane you could. There is the less risk-taking situation where, as you did, you can go to friends, or if you have some family, you can ask them for a little time to. Did actually the friends you went to, did they do you think they had? did you set up yourself a time limit to leave their house, or did they tell you, yeah, you can stay for a few weeks? Like, did they kind of give you a deadline?
No, but that's again a cultural thing, and obviously you have to talk about it beforehand. You can't just crash on someone's couch.
Yeah.
That's
People
just
plan
rude.
to leave their couch, not to stay on the couch.
Yeah, please do. Well, it was actually pretty funny. I'm of the quick sort. I came and they took me into their family, which was awesome. In the first 4 weeks, and after 4 weeks, I had already found an apartment and was set up and had already registered the business. And they were actually mad that I left after 4 weeks.
And how is, for example, this is another aspect that people don't think about, because, for example, in Italy, when you're looking for a place, of course, you need to pay this caution, which is about 3 months or 2 months or whatever.
Yeah,
something around this.
Deposit, you mean?
Yeah, the deposit. Yeah. And another cultural difference, for example, I've noticed in Germany, you don't get a refurbished flat. You get usually an empty flat that has maybe the kitchen, and sometimes you need even to buy the kitchen from who was there before you, or from the landlord. And how was in the US that situation? So in general, people should get informed about how is the cultural rental or buying situation.
Yeah, definitely. So Germany, yes, is very much more cost intense. Let's just put it that way. In America, it's very much easier because the Americans, you kind of have to understand how the system works and the culture works. America is a country that welcomes debt. So a lot of things are set up to give you credit, so you get into debt, which isn't very positive naturally. But the upside is you can find an apartment really fast, because even though you've maybe only been in the country a few weeks, like I'm an American citizen, so for me it was a little easier. But even if you're from outside of the country and you only have a visa, they're very happy to take your money and, to give you an apartment. Compared to Germany, you have to have like 3 paychecks, and you have to have the deposit, which is usually 3 months rent, and this and that. And Americans are just like, oh, you just got here, no problem. Here's a flat, and I don't need to see your pay stub. I mean, if you can't pay, you're on the street within 4 weeks.
Yeah, and
so you really have to
be careful with scam,
take that
because
into consideration. That too, yeah.
Yeah, because when I was moving in Germany, I didn't know how much the university will take care of finding for me a place. So I started looking for shared flat rooms, and I got a bunch of these messages. Hi, yeah, you can have the room. I don't need to meet you. Just transfer me 3,000 euros, and I'll leave the key in under whatever somewhere.
Yeah.
So don't believe those bullshit.
Yes.
Because
do your research, and I think that's one of the most important things that you can do in preparing. Do your research. Research in terms of how will you live there? How do you pay it? What are the employment options? What do you even need to get employment? That is one of the biggest pitfalls some people forget to consider. Do I need a special visa? And if I have all the documentation, what are organizations looking for? Maybe they don't want somebody from outside, or they need somebody who has a spokesperson within the country. Those are all things you have to consider, and you really have to do your research really, really well. I mean, in general, if we would give a rule of thumb, before moving abroad, you should at least plan in 6 months preparation.
Yeah, that's a good advice. As I said, for me it was a little different because the planning, it's a little different, but you still need to gather a lot of, you need to do a lot of email work with the different universities.
Yeah.
You need to do a lot of research with local students or students that already have been there. So yeah, maybe this will be another series of podcasts where people that have been in Erasmus will maybe explain better how they managed to join the program. And also, like, there are a lot of exchange programs between the US and Europe, or China and Europe, Korea and Europe. I've met people from everywhere here. So I'm sure that if you look for a program, you'll find one in, I don't know, maybe soon they will be active again, I guess, because it's strange times. But I'm sure that it will be after this whole situation, there will be a lot of opportunities for people, and then there will be more opportunities to move around the world. So we're almost getting to an hour, and people currently, it's 8 in the evening, so we're kind of hungry, so we want to go eat something too, because it's a weekday, and we are finally recording the magic 7th episode of the Creative Insider. So for a conclusion, could you think about maybe 2 or 3 smart, how did you call your tips? The quickies, something? Well, some yeah, Désirée likes pervert language. Give us a couple of, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, whatever comes to your mind, quickies to move abroad.
Okay. Sure. So off the top of my head, the first one would be know why you're moving abroad. Why are you doing it? Do you want to just do a vacation? Are you planning on doing a hermit's life? Do you actually want to advance your careers? All of those are good reasons, but you have to know what your goal is by moving abroad. Do you want to get away from a country that you don't like to maybe reappreciate that country in 5 years? So I think that's the most important first step, because that lays the groundwork for all your further decisions. I think the second tip would be to just stay open and to have the courage to actually do it. And when you do decide to do it, and to have the courage to face your friends and family who are going to miss you a lot, and who will, maybe some of them will be mad at you. So you have to have the courage to work through that and stand through that. And I don't know, a last tip, maybe a practical tip to the end. Get a LinkedIn profile. Because if we are talking about working abroad too, and finding an organization or a company that can help you get there, then LinkedIn is the international network for business people, and you can really start building connections through that, so that you don't go to a country and have no clue what's going on, because your research only gave you spam articles, because you never know until you really get there and stand in front of the door. And you can get into international communities or go into expat communities as well. But I think LinkedIn, especially for professionals, young professionals, it doesn't matter how much experience you have, is a great way to start connecting within your industry across company borders. And it's a platform that every single country uses very much, maybe except China. They have a different platform. But going to China will be a different set of rules.
I don't know. Well, currently it's pretty soon to talk about moving to China. We'll try to get someone that's been in China also on the podcast, so they can tell more us about.
Yeah, they have different regulations there. That's why it's different, not because of COVID, but because Chinese business culture works completely differently again. So.
Well, I can try to give my tips. You are, as always, you are between us the more on the emotional side. I'll be very, very technical. So people, before you move abroad, check what is the tax situation in the moment you start working abroad. Check out what is your health insurance situation before you move abroad, and check out if you can have a for example, in Germany, there are those very, very low cost insurance in case of you cause some damages to third to other people. So you can invest a little time on that few points, and you'll be in a big advantage.
Can I actually add 2?
Yeah, you can do that.
I have 2 more actually. If you are a professional moving abroad, inform yourself how much people are paid in that country. That is very important because taxes are different, payment is going to be different and benefits are going to be different. So don't forget that. And one further one as well, try to get like certificates or recommendations beforehand, even from your bank. You know, I went to the States and I knew I was coming from Germany, and I wrote my bank in German. I was like, could you tell them my credit worthiness in a letter? And I went with that letter to the States because credit worthiness and credit score is super important there and in any country. So get a few recommendations from a bank, get it from employers and everything. That's very helpful to have too.
Yeah, and final, I'll add too, if you're already a member on any board of some architecture design or whatever, check out what are you allowed to be, what is your title in that country, if you're allowed to practice it on your own, and things like this you can check in beforehand.
So that was 10 tips. Wow.
We have 10 tips. Well, we as always hope it's helpful for the people who are listening to give them some overview about these different topics that on first hand seems obvious, but then people are like, oh no, that wasn't that obvious. So we're wrapping it up. Thank you for coming. I hope that as my wise partner, you can join me on further episodes where we can discuss other topics I know you're very deep into. And before we're going to close the podcast, do you want to tell people where they can find you? What are you doing?
Yeah, so obviously on LinkedIn, because I mentioned it, under Désirée Bambynek. But I think you're going to link them in the description anyway. And I'm also on Instagram, brand.bambi. That's me, Brand Bambi. And and if you're into checking out websites, it's DésireeBambynek.com.
So yeah, people follow Désirée because you can find very interesting insights on her profiles. And of course, keep supporting the podcast by subscribing on whatever platform you're listening to. Share it with everybody you think might like it. Or force people that don't like it. I don't care. Just listen to the podcast.
Is it actually possible to like get questions or feedback from you guys, from you listeners? If you have any questions or anything, maybe they can email them to you. That would be.
Well, they can always text me on the usual social media channels, which are Instagram. It's always at TCI Podcast. Facebook page, The Creative Insider. LinkedIn page, The Creative Insider. And thank you again for listening. And don't worry, the next episode is coming on Monday. There will be a very cool interview. I'm not revealing the guest, but will be also very international. So I'll be happy if you could join me again on Monday. And yeah, so bye. That was it for today.
Bye, guys. Stay safe.